if you're in the business of creating health, whether that be lifestyle medicine, functional medicine, if you just have a clinic, a weight loss clinic, whatever it is, if you really want to be in the business of changing healthcare and sort of setting yourself up for having the biggest possible impact, you need to really start tracking your outcomes. And if you are tracking your outcomes, and if you have proven outcomes, I want to hear from you, because I intend in the next 5 or 10 years to broker the demand and supply for chronic disease reversal and metabolic function. What you're seeing in healthcare is more and more groups are going to get paid for their outcomes and not by their production. And so if you are good, the first thing is get great outcomes. Second is do it consistently and track all those outcomes. And I think that organizations that do that will be able to have a bigger impact, have a bigger, very far expanded financial future.
Welcome to Beyond the Scale. I'm your host, Bradley Davie. This podcast exists to educate and empower the next generation of healthcare providers. We're here to share powerful tips, tricks, tools, and resources to catalyze your growth in the application of InBody's ecosystem of health assessment tools. Today, we're going to talk about how body composition is applied in functional and integrative medicine and leverages a powerful tool within a proven model for success. My guest today is James Maskell. James is on the leadership team for a group that we work with called Freedom Practice Coaching. Additionally, he's spent the past decade innovating in the cross-section of functional and integrative medicine, developing healing communities around the world, writing books, speaking, and championing the evolution of medicine. Welcome to Beyond the Scale, James.
Yeah, great to be here. Really excited.
Thank you. I'm excited, too, to share your insights with our audience, not only because Freedom Practice Coaching's had so much success in helping grow businesses to 7 figures with efficient systems for sales and marketing and operations, but also I have a lot of admiration for the work that you've done in progressing the field as we try to grow more healing in the communities where we're practicing medicine, from your work with the Functional Forum, Evolution of Medicine, and even in your latest project, Heal Communities. So tell me a little bit more. Where did you get your start, and what motivates you most to keep pushing through and innovating and growing?
Well, look, I was the weird kid at school that did natural medicine. I had a homeopath and a chiropractor as my medicine before the age of 11. And I guess I didn't realize that was not normal until I got to school and realized that no one knew what either of those things were. And I grew up in England. And so, there are many things in my childhood that, I had to try and triangulate, right? So I was the only kid in school whose parents had to be called before I was given antibiotics. So then, as now I get older and I'm in the phase where I think my parents are insane and, like everyone does, and I'm on a sort of a rebellious phase to, make money and sort of go on my own path. And I start to see the news about antibiotic resistance. I'm like, how did my mom with no medical training predict antibiotic resistance by 30 years or 20 years? How is that even possible? Like, what's going on? And then also in my degree, I did a degree in economics, but I did a focus on health economics, and saw that in my lifetime, and not a long time in my lifetime, but literally right now. So this was 20 years ago when I'm in university, whole economies would be destroyed by the cost of chronic illness. And, that the cost of chronic illness would become so unbearable that neither a country like America that, has a sort of a hodgepodge of government payers and employers and whatever, or the UK where I grew up, that's all paid for by the government, neither could withstand. And here we are, and it's not going well, and so that was the original push, is that I just realized that was going to happen in my lifetime. And then, I would say a sort of a push from the universe, I would say, pushed me to come and work in this space, a psychedelic dream, you could say. And, for the last 19 years, I've been trying to work out, what is chronic illness? Where does it come from? Is it reversible? Can it be reversed at meaningful scale? Can it be reversed at the scale that it exists? And ultimately, that's still a full-time job. The revolution has not happened. The outcomes are still getting worse, but the team is growing, and I'm, more clear than ever before that like we're on the path towards creating something that's sustainable and healthful. But there's a lot more friction to remove from that transformation and evolution still.
Tell me more about where you took that inspiration then, and how did you apply that to medicine and the field?
Yeah, well, the first thing I wanted to know is chronic disease reversible? Because I had a feeling that it was, and I had met people who had reversed their chronic illness, but I wanted to see it for myself. So in 2005, I moved to America and I worked for a clinic in Georgia that was sort of being built as a future model for the future of care, which was basically like integrated medicine delivered in a spa-like environment. And so I was able at that clinic to actually see chronic disease being reversed, not in a day, not in a week, but in, 3 months, 6 months, a year. I could actually know people and see people visibly transform, and I didn't see their labs, but I saw them walk in, and I realized that they had changed significantly since their last visit. So I was like intrigued, and then I was like, well, is this happening anywhere else, or am I just in the one place in the world that's doing this? And so I took a job, much like you, selling to people who were doing this kind of work. So for 9 years, I was a rep in the field, and I was selling to all range of what they would call like alternative providers. So chiropractors, acupuncturists, naturopaths, functional medicine doctors, nutritionists, all different types. And I learned in that 9 years, I got like the deepest, broadest education in what was happening. And I recognized that, yes, many people were actually playing a part in reversing chronic illness. Um, but I also started to realize that it was not a cohesive movement. They didn't have the same language. They didn't work well together necessarily. There weren't integrative centers that were very successful that had all these people working together with the patient at the middle that had proven models. And, so that sort of was stage one. And then, like, I guess the latest 8 stages since 2014 has really been about me starting to bring my own ideas forward. In one, how could you get that cohesion? How could you build cohesion around teams? And that's what led me to functional medicine. And then second, how do you scale it? How do you make more doctors want to do it? How do you make it aspirational? How do you track the outcomes across a network to, you know, prove that it works? And then how do you get people to pay for it, both individuals and now employers and health systems and whatever? So that's what I'm continually working on. It's all about removing friction to adoption. And that friction is in so many ways, right? There's friction because doctors aren't trained like that. Insurance companies don't pay for that. People advertising on TV tells you should do drugs for as the first line therapy. Like there's all these levels of friction that go into the status quo being the way that it is. And piece by piece, we're just like removing that friction so that more and more people can actually know what health is and how to achieve it, how to keep it, how to maintain it. And we're all working together, I think, and I see you as a big part of that team as well.
Thank you. Can you tell me more about then the philosophy of care that you've developed over this time, where you've had so much perspective on the industry? What kind of commonalities do you see in successful application of healthcare that has become part of your philosophy and how you teach to others as you move along?
Yeah, well, the reason why I chose functional medicine and I started the Functional Forum, which started in 2014, and we were really the first people to put, you know, progressive medical education, on the internet free, right? And that was why the Functional Forum blew up because, at that moment, there wasn't really any of this education. You had to go to an expensive, conference in order to like start your journey. And most people just won't do that as a first step. But what I saw with functional medicine was a sort of um, the goal was right? With the goal was reversal of chronic illness. And second, there was sort of a cohesive framework whereby groups of practitioners could really work together to achieve that goal. So when I saw for the first time the sort of functional medicine matrix being taught at a conference, I thought this is great because you could have, a chiropractor, functional medicine doctor, nutritionist, and whatever all work together if one of them did the intake and saw that structure was the biggest issue from that intake, you could send them to go and have a chiropractic adjustment. And that would probably be a huge net benefit because structure is the biggest cause of the problem. But that's not the cause for everyone. And so it allows a prioritization to use resources in the most efficient way. And I could just recognize that that was going to be a key part of it. And yeah, so that's why we chose functional medicine as a starting point. I think there are other methodologies that have value. There's a whole lifestyle medicine movement that's happening where 100 health systems in America have adopted lifestyle medicine, and it's making really big strides in sort of bigger organizations. But and functional medicine is built on a foundation of lifestyle medicine, but lifestyle medicine is not really as threatening to the status quo because it's sort of like you're saying to the doctors, well, you didn't really learn about lifestyle in school, or if you did learn about it, like patients aren't doing it. Here's a framework to get patients to do it, and that's great, and I think it's really valuable. But functional medicine is a little bit more threatening because it's kind of like, hey, this autoimmune disease that you're intending to manage for the next 20 years is actually probably reversible if you do medicine differently. And doctors don't like to hear that. They don't want to know that like their whole education didn't prepare them to actually get a better outcome than is possible, that through their education. And so, that's the reason why functional medicine has been extremely successful to the consumer, extremely successful in that there's a functional medicine clinic in every little town around the country, but not as successful in getting into mainstream adoption inside hospitals, health systems, and other organizations. But it is starting to happen.
What do you think it'll take to make that happen?
It's a good question, and actually, it relates to like a lot about what you do. Is we have to track the outcomes, right? We have to know and prove that it works. And it's one thing to track the clinical outcomes, and I think that's really important. And one of the things that I recognized when I tried the InBody for the first time is I recognized like, okay, you could actually track someone's journey from obesity to reversal of obesity, very clearly and successfully through this if a clinic had one. So it's about tracking the clinical outcomes, but then it's also about tracking the cost outcomes, and that's much harder to do because so many different people pay the price for it. But that's the most exciting thing that's happening for me right now is getting to be in the middle of transactions where the people that actually buy healthcare, so insurance companies and employers, are actually wanting to buy this medicine. And so now we have to just like connect the demand and supply. And one of the biggest reasons why they can't purchase the current supply is because the outcomes aren't being tracked, and the measurements aren't there to prove that it does what it say it does. But it's getting there, and I see the journey in front of us. And there are organizations, if you started tracking your outcomes 10 years ago, you're in the position right now to sign incredibly big contracts with risk bearing entities that want to see people get healthy. And so we're a bit behind the eight ball, but like now there's some pressure to get people to actually do things in the right way. And I think that's going to be very important for the future.
Tell me a little bit more about secrets maybe that you've learned about developing communities around functional medicine and healing communities as you've gone along your journey.
Yeah, so the first thing I did with the functional forum, I think that a lot of the success around that was introducing doctors that were doing this methodology to each other, right? When I was a sales rep, I recognized that, there were two doctors who were both essentially doing the same thing, like cutting edge therapies. When I was a rep, I lived in Connecticut. And in Connecticut, Lyme disease is pretty prevalent there. That's where Lyme come from, old Lyme, Connecticut. And so there were really innovative doctors doing really cool stuff with Lyme disease. And, at that, they were, right now, here we are 10 years later, and now there's articles in the New York Times saying doctors aren't good at doing with Lyme disease and they don't recognize it. Well, there were people 10 years ago that really understood it and were doing great work with it, but they didn't know each other. They never met each other, even though they were just like a few doors down or in the same town. And so the goal of the functional forum was, one, was to make it easy for doctors to find out about it, but two, to introduce them to each other at scale. And so, we at the functional forum in 2017, 18, there were 400 meetup groups around the world watching the show every month. And, some of the really cool things, like I remember once in 2016, we did a show and there were 50 medical students in Manila in the Philippines on Tuesday morning watching the Functional Forum live from New York, 8 o'clock the night before. So we were able to do some cool things that had never been done. And it was a really fun opportunity. And, if sharing content like that and creating communities could have facilitated the functional medicine revolution, then it would have already been done. But it turns out it's not enough. You've got to actually control more of the variables to make it happen. And so that's, continually, that journey of learning. So that was on the doctor side. On the patient side, I wrote a book called The Community Cure, my second book. And it was really about looking at group delivered medicine as a way of delivering functional medicine in a scalable, effective way that was much more effective than one-on-one, because loneliness and high social stress was this root cause that was not generally being addressed by doctors. So if you're a doctor that is doing root cause focused care, which is what functional medicine is, what if the root cause is the person has a toxic relationship? And what if the root cause is a person who, is lonely? And what if it is someone who doesn't have a support system around them? And what if all of their friendships reinvigorate and support unhealthy behaviors, right? Then it's going to be very difficult for them to participate in their own healing and reverse their chronic illness. So that was the theme of the second book. And, what I learned there is that, if the most valuable thing that a doctor could do is to introduce two people who want to get healthy to each other, because that mutual support and that accountability and power, really gets people over the hump to continuously execute on healthy behaviors for, 6 months, a year, 2 years, a lifetime, that is necessary for healthy living and living to 100 and not having chronic illness.
Healthy social interactions can probably be a challenging thing for a lot of doctors to talk about or to engage with their patients, where they're measuring so many other things and supporting the patients with different modalities of care. What kind of recommendations do you have for practices to start to implement more social interactions among their patients?
Yeah, well, there's a few things. I mean, first, if you read the book, if you get the book, The Community Cure, and you can listen to it, if you go to thecommunitycure.com/audiobook, you can download and listen to it for free, and you can see that book is a step-by-step guide on how to build group medical structures in your system. So, if you're an InBody user, which you probably are if you're listening to this podcast, what if instead of, doing your care one-on-one and having patients coming in every month, coming in, what if you did it in a group, right? What if you had groups of people that met on a certain time every other week or every month or every week, and you created a group program where a group of people could support each other in making the changes necessary? My mother-in-law lost 100 pounds through Overeaters Anonymous, and the only thing that changed was that she had an accountability mentor that she had to call every day and tell them what she'd eaten. Simple, could take 2 minutes a day. But through that process and not through anything else, she was able to have an incredible transformation. And that didn't cost her anything. It didn't cost the other person anything. And it was valuable to her and it was valuable to the other person. And so that is the kind of peer-to-peer value. So the first thing is, I would recommend for people to create group programs, right? Group offerings that can also be lower cost, can reduce reduce the cost of acquisition, reduce the cost of participation, to bring new patients into your practice and give, a wider group of people an opportunity to be part of your programs. And then you have to get people to want to be part of that group. And that is actually has its own friction too, because it's not cool and sexy and aspirational to be in Alcoholics Anonymous. And it kind of feels a little bit like that. But the truth is, from my experience, most people don't want to be part of a group until they try it once and then they're hooked. So some of the work that I've been doing recently is to try and create structures where practitioners could give people an experience of being in a group. So imagine a practice orientation that you did for your practice, where every new patient had to come in, and there's plenty of examples of this where new patients had to come in and as part of that orientation, not only did they learn about how to get the most out of your practice, but they actually got to introduce to other people who are also interested in getting healthy. Like that is a proven way to be able to create cohesion, introduce people to each other, and bring people into the practice. And we created a project called Vegas Fest. And if you go to vegasfest.com, that's VAGUSFEST, it's a participatory learning event that you could put on in your community in a park for free that gives people the tools to modulate their vagus nerve, to heal their vagus nerve, to tone their vagus nerve, to understand their vagus nerve and what it does, and to do that in a participatory way. All of those resources are free, and it's a way for groups to do that orientation, but instead of just and introduce people to each other, but instead of just teaching people what might be possible if they did the things you said, to actually give them an experience of healing. Because what all of this medicine that we're involved with, what it is at its foundation is participatory, right? And my feeling is that if you want to sell participatory medicine, better to get people to participate and actually do something towards healing themselves, as opposed to just teaching them that participatory medicine might be best, right? Let's get them to actually do something. And so that's what Vegas Fest is. And again, it's on the same trajectory as I've been on for 19 years, which is how do we reduce the friction to implementation of health focused practices. And that's just another thing that we're working on right now.
It makes me think of one of the popular applications of our technology when somebody brings it into a clinic or a business of any type, whether it's fitness or nutrition. There's a transformational challenge that people tend to want to start, where they bring everybody in and they set a starting point, say January 1st, and we want to bring the group of people that want to join in together to test in on this day or within this week's period. And then for the next 2 to 3 months, we're going to create a healthy competition around increasing lean mass and decreasing body fat. And at the end of those 2 to 3 months, we're going to have everybody test out. And then we're going to measure who had the most positive change. And then we're going to reward those people that had that change. And it's been a great way to bring together community around the device. And some people even make it like kind of like a festival environment where they build up, people showing up to test in, and then along the way, there's group activities for fitness or nutrition and coaching along the way too. And I've seen people that make the reward at the end of this so remarkable that it drives all their marketing for the year. The one that is most notable to me, the business owner used his airline points and his timeshare, and he sent the winners to Hawaii for a week who had the most positive change across that challenge. And it drove all of his marketing for the year, where everybody that came, a bunch of them would end up staying in and participating for the rest of the year too. So that seems to be, I think, around InBody, a great way that we could support your mission of building that community.
I love everything about that. I think it's healthy. It's using the tools that you have. It's giving people data. So I love what you're saying. I think it's really valuable, and I think that's a good use of the technology. I think one of the cool things that I was just really excited about with InBody when I started to see it was just how valuable it was to have a consistent touch point in the practice where people could kind of see their score, and that the score was really like sophisticated and valuable. And so, yeah, I'm glad to hear that that's happening. And I can't help but think that that's really valuable and powerful. And yeah, I mean, if you're a business owner and you're buying stuff with your credit card, you're going to accumulate points, and you can either use that for yourself, but if it could drive the marketing for your practice, even better.
One thing that you said, consistency, accountability, motivation, all these are things in my mind that relate to health coaching. And I see and hear what you're saying is maybe there's a convergence here of more health coaching and medicine. Would you agree?
100%. Yeah. So my first book, The Evolution of Medicine, really shine a light on health coaching. My business partner, The Evolution of Medicine, was a health coach, probably the first functional medicine health coach out there. So he had been a coach in 2007 when I met him. He was a coach working in a functional medicine office in Long Island. And yeah, it was like we recognized even back then that A few things. One is that behavior change and participation is at the cornerstone of all the medicine, and the coach was really a lot better designed and trained to execute on behavior change. There's something powerful about the sort of peer-to-peer mentorship that's really valuable, where the person is just one step ahead as opposed to 50 steps ahead in their healing. And then the third thing is, like, when I was living in New York and we had started the Functional Forum, about twice a week, I would get a message from someone saying, "Oh, who do you recommend to see? Which doctor do you recommend to see? I've got this, and that going on." And, over time, having made like 100 referrals over a year, I look back at it and I was like, if you've got someone who's chronically ill and chances are their lifestyle has been a factor in it, who should be the first person that I should refer to? Should it be the $1,500 best functional medicine doctor in New York, who's like the best of the best and gets amazing outcomes and can reverse any chronic illness with enough support and time? Or should it be my partner, the coach, who, is $150 an hour and will actually sit down and listen with you and just be like, "Hey, what's going on in your life? Tell me what's going on." Because so many of the issues were based in like emotional, psycho-spiritual, connection, relationships, like it's all that kind of stuff. And I just saw that like every person that I put in touch with the coach, came back to me and was like, "Holy shit, thank you. Like, this is amazing. I'm really grateful to meet this guy. And he really helped me, think through some things and that kind of stuff." So that was like the feedback that I would get there. And then with the functional medicine doctor, it was hit and miss. For those people who had seen everyone and was just looking for someone to really get to the root cause and do the diagnostics and whatever, they were so grateful. And then a lot of people were like, "Really? This is like the next step, is that I have to like spend this much money on something like that?" So I just recognized, like, why do we not put health coaching first? Right? If we want, if participation is like a foundation of the future of medicine, let's focus on first getting participation and then going deeper if necessary. But I've seen plenty of people that have reversed their chronic illness just by, being in working with a coach. And now that I've been in a men's group for the last, 5 years, I've seen people who have engaged and participated and reversed their chronic illness with no medical support at all, and not even a professional coach, just a group of men who are holding each other accountable to their own goals. And so, I'm always looking for what is the lightest possible touch for the most successful outcomes. And I tend to think that we should try content and community and coaching before we get into medical care.
Have you been able to blend functional medicine and coaching in a way that will help evolve the ability for health coaches to work within the functional medicine space?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I've been talking about hiring health coaches for a decade. And, if you look out in the functional medicine world, where maybe 10 years ago, there was 1 in 25 clinics that had a health coach, you see that a lot of them do now, maybe 50%. And, ultimately, but we see that it's a critical part. So, one of the things that we're working with FPC, one of the companies is called Viability, Vibilty. And Viability is basically like it's a service where it provides a learning curriculum and health coaching alongside your clinical care, so that you can essentially sell the patient into, say, an episode of care, right, where they're gonna, they've got a metabolic program that you've sold them, right, that they're gonna, go through a process with you. But then in the background, you can essentially have health coaching and a curriculum and outcome tracking that is deployed alongside your care. It's white labeled, so it looks like it's part of your clinic. And then you can pay for it on a patient by patient basis. So you don't have to like take a chance, hire a health coach and hope that you can fill them up with appointments, which could be, risky financially if you're just starting your business. So with Viability, you can actually just pay for it on a per patient basis, and that reduces the risk and allows you to operate like a big clinic and be a very small clinic. And so, yeah, it's proving very successful. It's particularly successful if you're focused on metabolic health, and it's particularly successful if you white label it, which is one of the services they provide. And so, the patient doesn't know that that health coach isn't sitting in the room next to you in your practice. They have their relationship with that coach, and they think that that coach works for you. And so it works very well.
Well, you mentioned FPC, which stands for Freedom Practice Coaching. Can you tell me a little bit more about FPC and what mission they're on today?
Yeah, so Freedom Practice Coaching was actually our first sponsor on the Functional Forum 10 years ago. And we brought them on because, one, we recognized that their mission was really aligned, right? The goal was to help practices and help doctors and health professionals build strong, sustainable practices and really serve their community in reversing chronic illness. And, over the last 10 years, they've probably been the most successful coaching group to help healthcare entrepreneurs build those kind of practices. I guess one of the flaws, not flaws, but I guess one of the sort of sticking points of my thesis in the evolution of medicine was that doctors could leave the system, become entrepreneurs, and be, and change the health of their community. But being an entrepreneur is tricky, and a lot of healers don't necessarily want to be entrepreneurs or don't feel drawn to that. And so Freedom Practice Coaching exists to provide like the mentorship, support, accountability, and best practices to build a financially viable and sustainable medical practice reversing chronic illness. And so, I had known about them for a long time. They were, again, like I said, a sponsor. So we put a lot of doctors into that at the early days. And then last year, I had an opportunity to join in a couple different ways. So, there's Freedom Practice Coaching today. If you're wanting to build a successful practice doing this kind of work, definitely a great opportunity there. I'm part of a group called Legacy within Freedom Practice Coaching, which is for doctors and practices that are over $1 million in revenue. And typically, those kind of practices have very different needs than people who are just getting started, right? They looking at hiring and building teams and creating cohesion and getting things done and setting targets. And it's a lot more about personnel management because they've got their product market fit and they're now looking to scale. And so that's been really, really amazing too, because I've seen, okay, what does it look like to go from 1 million to 10 million, not 0 to 1, which is what a lot of the focus has been in the last 10 years, because there weren't that many of these practices. So yeah, Freedom Practice Coaching is a really interesting company. It's a great company. I'm glad to be part of it. And much like InBody is building like an ecosystem of services and support to really build that. So you've got Freedom Practice Coaching, which is the coaching entity, and they're helping clinics build like either membership-based practices or program-based packages to run their practice. And then Viability is part of that ecosystem, and Viability is deployed by clinics in that ecosystem to deliver the education, coaching, and outcome tracking. And now, we have proof that 40,000 people have gone through the programs, and people lose on average 15 pounds, and people get off on average one medication. And 60 to 70% of people who go through the programs have significant improvements in sleep and stress levels, and that's scored across patient reported outcome measures that are validated by the NIH. So that's what we're in the business of doing, is sort of showcasing the value of these clinics in consistently reversing chronic illness.
It seems like a functional medicine practice would be a great application of the freedom practice methodology, especially perhaps in a young industry where maybe many doctors are going out on their own and they need that support through the life cycle of their business, maybe even to set it up for success from the beginning and then be able to scale it in the future.
For sure. And that's what we're looking for. I mean, it's one thing is, yeah, if you're a functional medicine business and you're up and running and you want to really take it to the next level, that's like perfect for us. But I would also say, like, we have clients that are, pharmacists and, other areas, like, clinics that are weight loss clinics. And, ultimately, like, any organization that is trying to, it's now possible to sort of add a functional medicine program onto almost any kind of other health business. And we've really made it easy to do that. So, if you're interested and want to find out more, you can go to Freedom Practice Coaching. You can book a call with one of our team. And, it's a great opportunity to see, like, how easy it is now with all of these services like Viability to build a sort of plug and play metabolic program. And by the way, InBody is going to be a really important part. If you're already up and running with InBody, it's going to be very easy to put together a 6 month, weight loss program that gets real outcomes and can be measured and, get all the like marketing operations and other insight to build it and build it sustainably.
Can you share anything else about the synergy with InBody and Freedom Practice?
Yeah, look, I think the one of the biggest things that we're all about is tracking the outcomes of success, like showcasing that this works. And a lot of the things that we're seeing success with is like with viability. You can do the labs at the beginning and the end. So, imagine how much proof do you need to know that people get healthy in your program? Well, reported outcomes will be great. Lab testing's amazing, but like the body composition analysis is really powerful too, because we see from GLP-1s, if you lose 25 pounds, but 20 pounds of it was muscle, was that really a win? And so with a tool like InBody, you can actually see if you're doing it, maybe GLP-1s can be part of your overall protocol. But ultimately, what we want to see is people getting healthier and people losing fat and building muscle. And it's very hard to do that with a weight scale. And InBody creates a structure where you can actually show a lot more sophisticated outcomes. If I'm in the market for a weight loss program and your program can prove that the average person who goes through puts on 15 pounds of muscle and loses 20 pounds overall, like that's what I want to sign up for, because I don't want to take the chance that I do what people who just take GLP-1s and don't do any healthy things do, which is lose a lot of muscle and don't actually get healthier. They might just be starved for 6 months, but that's not really health.
Yeah, it really helps to validate the outcomes that are being achieved within the practice and then hold them accountable and motivated over time. So I think we have a great synergy together. And you actually shared a link with me, and we'll put it in the show notes if somebody wants to learn more about Freedom Practice and also join an exclusive workshop with you and your team where you dive into the FPC model for success, hiring and team development, sales and marketing systems.
I'm in a unique position. I'll just share. I haven't really shared this with anyone, but like I have recently been contracted by a group, an ACO. So an ACO is an accountable care organization. So they represent 450,000 patients, Medicare patients across, I think across like 2,000 practices in 20 states. And they they have already got the majority. They're in the business of saving money on healthcare, and they have already exhausted all of the money saving options through workflow changes, technology, automation, whatever. And the CEO told me the other day that their viability in the next 10 years depends on actually getting people healthy. So I guess I just want to finish off by saying that if you're in the business of creating health, whether that be lifestyle medicine, functional medicine, if you just have a clinic, a weight loss clinic, whatever it is, if you really want to be in the business of changing healthcare and sort of setting yourself up for having the biggest possible impact, you need to really start tracking your outcomes. And if you are tracking your outcomes and if you have proven outcomes, I want to hear from you, because I intend in the next 5 or 10 years to broker the demand and supply for chronic disease reversal and metabolic function. And there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of patients, and the ACO just happens to be the first kind of entity that benefits financially by getting people healthy. But that's not the only group. Employers do too, and others. And so what you're seeing in healthcare is more and more groups are going to get paid for their outcomes and not by their production. And so if you are good, the first thing is get great outcomes. Second is do it consistently and track all those outcomes. And I think that organizations that do that will be able to have a bigger impact, have a bigger, very far expanded financial future. Because the truth is, the only people that have bought these kind of services up until now are regular people. But 80% of healthcare is bought by other entities, and we have not tapped into that. But that is about to happen. And so, you can really set yourself up for success with the right organization. And hopefully today you've heard about some tools, resources that might help you, whatever your practice type is, tap into that and take best advantage of it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, James. I appreciate that. I'm going to share all the notes for the Vegas Fest, for Viability. If people want to learn more or connect with James, check out his books, audio. JamesMaskell.com would be the best place for that. And then if you want to learn more about InBody, we've actually got a special offer for anybody coming through this podcast for Freedom Practice Coaching. If you go to InBodyUSA.com/FPC, a member of our team will reach out to you there. And we will make a special offer, teach you about what we got going on and how you can integrate that into your practice. Thank you very much, James, for joining me today. I appreciate you.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.